Hello everybody and welcome to Yo Pops podcast with me, Sean Williams, and just me. I know, he's away, but don't worry. Kevin McAllister face. We hope that everybody is having an amazing week so far. And as we said, my father is away, so you're stuck with me for a little bit, guys. But we have some amazing new spin-offs and new bits of content and product to show you. But first, let's get through the formalities. Please, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, at Yo Pops Podcast, also on Spotify, Amazon, and everywhere that you stream and you get your podcast content. Guys, download, share the love, please. And also, I'm about 50 downloads, or I should say we're about 50 downloads away from 250 for Yo Pops. So guys, come on, get involved. And also, I always feel kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Conflicted sometimes with what I'm about to say next, but less more recently, because some of your wonderful messages and the interactions that we're having with you that's been enabled us to make today's episode is amazing, and you have been asking. So here it is. Guys, please, Yo Pops Poddy at paypal.me. Let me say that again. At paypal.me/Yo Pops Poddy if you want to donate. Also, you can find us on Patreon, and it's up to you, honestly. We are more invested in the fact that you have the intention to give and support. And also, conceptually, I'm a real seed guy, right? And so the beauty or the wonder of nature and growth is that the seed first goes into the ground, and before it shoots up, it grows down. And then you sit there and you think, but what's it grown down into? Darkness. So what is it about the dark that allows us to grow stronger roots that keep us grounded, so that when we do shoot up and we break the surface, what happens above the surface? Weathering. We're seeing it all over the world right now. But when your roots are secure and solid, whatever's happening above the surface means that though it may shake you, you may lose some leaves, it may be uncomfortable, branches may break, the tree still remains. So any seed, any donation, anything you want to give, from the smallest to the biggest, to whatever your heart and your mind can conspire and wants to do, we're here. We're going to jump into today's poddy. It's slightly different. As you can see, we have two sets of our regular podcast question cards. On the black pile, we have questions of the sun. We have gone over some of the comments, some of the wonderful messages that you've given over the last period of time, and we've been able to just curate like a bunch of really cool questions that we think you'd want to ask myself. And then we have questions of the father, where we've done the exact same process, and we've got some questions that we think that if my dad was here, you'd want to ask him, but because he's not, I'm going to be father and son, even though I'm just the son. Anyway, let us first jump into our first question, and I think I should have got a coin or something to flick here, man. Let's start with questions of... Go on then, in honor of my old man. Please, Lord, what am I going to ask here? What would your dad make of the storm in Jamaica? Well, firstly, thoughts and prayers are going out to everybody that is either on the island and going through it in real time. And if you are like much of my extended family and you're kind of sitting in other locations watching the horror of what's happening unfold, let not your heart be troubled, right? And I say it for this reason. I'm old enough to remember when Storm Gilbert happened. Now, I wasn't cognizant of what was happening because I was very young, very young. But within my childhood, especially at family events and just growing up, you heard about Storm Gilbert. And the thing that was always intrinsically linked to Storm Gilbert was, especially within my family and kind of the telling of the story in that moment, was the prayer that the island and us as Jamaican people got into, to the point where, and obviously generationally, we're now talking about my grandparents and my great-grandparents. Generationally, it was a massive moment because Gilbert was Melissa before Melissa, if that makes sense. And my grandparents were determined to pray that storm away. And the island got unified. And they were like, well, we understand what the geographical and the weather readings are, but their experience and in terms of culturally and spiritually, Jamaica has always been an island and a nation of people that are spiritually conscious. And I remember our grandparents, or hearing about it, they got down into some real prayer. And Gilbert came and passed with not as much destruction as first believed, which leads me into saying this. Some storms we can pray away, other storms are built for us to endure through, right? So some storms come to pass and to strengthen us in what we're trying to do, and other storms come for us to endure. And when you have to endure a storm, that requires a steady person, a steady heart, a steady mind. And I've been seeing on social media, some people are like, pray for Jamaica, pray for Jamaica, pray for, which is in its intention is beautiful. But I would say this, don't worry about praying for Jamaica. Jamaica will pray for itself. When the storm passes, send aid. Help Jamaica build back better. I think sometimes we get very caught up in the pray hands and pray for souls and but anybody that understands the history of that island, they're a nation of praying people. So whilst the prayers are wonderful, no. Jamaica will pray for itself. But when it passes and it's time to build back better, send aid. So yeah, I think if my dad was here, he would say, this too shall pass. But while it is, endure. Endure. And use this time to re-anchor yourself outside of the visual environmental world that often shapes and influences how we see ourselves, but not only ourselves, but ourselves within the world. And sometimes you need to anchor back down to what you know over what you think. Our grandparents anchored into what they knew, right? With less information, they did more. And sometimes these things come to create balance and to clear the ground. And so that is what if my dad was here, I think that's what he'd say. He'd say, some storms come to pass, some storms are for you to endure, but in any case, it's what you're anchored to that will determine your survival rate, or even if you survive. So, yeah, I think that's what you'd say. That was quite a bit deep. Let's hope that this question is going to be a little bit easier. Actually, maybe. So, questions of the sun. What advice would you give to someone struggling with efficient communication with their parents? Oh, help us, Jesus. And Christmas is coming up too. 9 times out of 10, anytime I've had these conversations, and even in my own process really, I think there is a certain level of Okay, let me just be straight to the point. A lot of the time, miscommunication or communication that doesn't feel efficient or that feels blocked is because there is usually an obstacle there. That obstacle is usually tied to something historical that happened emotionally, that shapes our perspective, right? So if perspective is how I saw it, then my perspective is built up of a history of lived experiences that shapes my idea. Even when I'm processing what I'm about to think about, it almost provides the lens through which I'm going to see that particular situation. And I think, especially with our generation and the one younger, there are moments where there was either bits of information we needed, there was care that we were looking for, or a bridge that we needed to cross. And sometimes in moments that people aren't aware of, that's where they do the most damage. Some of the things that breaks our hearts, the person that broke our heart wasn't even aware what they were doing. And those become the life curves that then shapes the road ahead for us, and often how fluid and sincere those relationships, those people are. So the first thing I'd say is you first have to forgive in your own heart, right? Because when dealing with parents, I think when you get to a certain age, you come from two different places. You are either projecting what you want to say or the point you're trying to make, or you are reflecting the point you want to say you want to make, right? Now, let me let that make sense. There is, let me let that make sense. Yeah, that makes sense. There is a common saying, once a parent, twice a child. Okay. Now, the basis of that is that obviously we're all children. We go through a moment of adulthood, and then as we get on the other side of the mountain, we become childlike again because we need the assistance of those stronger than us because we become more frail, right? So as a child, we're more vulnerable, and then as a much older person, we become more frail. So in those two moments, we need people to help carry cover. And there are moments where sometimes the things that we are dealing with, that we didn't deal with in our childhood, they become obstacles and walls in our adult life, which in moments where our parents are relearning, obviously life is a completely, the whole process of it is about learning and assimilating information. However, we all do that at different levels, capacities, and time periods. So what you have to do is take away the walls that you've built based on what you thought, because none of us have life figured out. So if none of us have life figured out, then the first thing we always have to be mindful of is that we're prone more so to making mistakes to get it right than getting it right absent of mistakes, right? So I work in education, and I prefer my students who make multiple mistakes to then get it right, because they understand the different ways that you can assimilate something looking like it's okay, but not being the full thing. So that's where sometimes we cut corners. But to a person that got it right straight away, there isn't necessarily that time investment where the falling down is what creates the platform to remain standing up. I'm going to say that one more time. Sometimes it's the consistent falling down that allows you to appreciate the sustained ability to stand up, right? And if you can get to a place where firstly you can realize that you're dealing with another human, 1. 2, you are their iOS update. You have the bug fixes that they weren't given. That's the basis of, even if you're iPhone or Android, right? We have this thing called iOS updates, which means that the operating services, as we get new models, they become quicker, right? They figure out the issues of before. And it means that our operating system, how we can access the apps and the information we want, it becomes quicker. But one thing we should be aware of, though these new models are quicker, the old models are more robust. I'm going to say that one more time. Though the new models are quicker and have the capacity to do more, the older models are more robust. And I can give you clarity with this. There's a reason why the President of the United States doesn't necessarily use a mobile phone. For as amazing as that device is, there is also vulnerabilities within it that means that should they need to go into a reduced state within their environment, that means that the connection, the ability to track and to follow and to trace and to have instantaneous connection, at times that needs to be reduced because the position they hold means that they need a certain level of space and isolation. And the comm service they use stops being this amazing genius wireless thing that we have, and they go back to hard lines, dug deep in the earth and buried. That's what they trust. So I think that if you can go into those conversations with the balance of knowing, though I have the bug fixes and I may be a little bit faster, based off of more information, this is the first model that has the capacity to understand what I'm saying. It may need a little bit more processing time, but at the same time, it's maybe a little bit more robust and a little bit more resilient than I am, which means that there is, in the reciprocity of sincere communication, because that's what sincere communication is. It's the flowing. I speak to listen, right? Or I speak so that you can hear. And then I then listen so that when I do speak, I don't speak to react, I speak to respond. And when those foundations are what you are building the relationship upon or trying to create resolution or find solution upon, how can the building not stand? So we're going to go to our next question. I'm going to take another one from the Sun pile because that was quite cool. It'd be nice to finish with my dad after. What advice would you give to a young person trying to find love? Don't look for a trophy, look for a partner. Don't look for a trophy, look for a partner. We live in a time when visuality feels like everything to us. Much of what we want to do is based on what we see or what we think we see in the moment. Everything in our day-to-day, when I think of, most of us will have a device and we will use social media or other different bits and pieces in order to connect with the world around us and the internet and everything else. And sometimes what we miss is the desensitization of the real us in comparison to the projected visual version of who we can be through filters, through perception, through projection. So when I say that, I mean in terms of we may go somewhere that we're going to for a special moment, but when we look at some of our presentations online, we will make people think that this is our lifestyle and this is what we do regularly. And sometimes these types of synthetic models, they fall into the most important places of our life. The worst thing you can do is substitute something organic for something for something synthetic. Okay? The worst thing you can do is to substitute something organic for something synthetic. Why? Because the synthetic thing just simulates what the organic thing is. It's not what it is. And the organic thing does not do to your insides. Though the organic thing and the synthetic thing will look the same, they have two completely different outputs. With a trophy is something you win in a moment. You celebrate it in a moment. And then you put it on a mantelpiece for a moment. A partner, they celebrate the trophy with you long after the moment's gone. A partner helps you strategize and execute the plan to get that trophy. A partner sits with you whilst you both look at that trophy. You look at each other and then you ask the question, should we go get another? So sometimes you're looking for something that you can put on a pedestal, and what you really need is something that will walk along the road of life with you. A trophy looks good, shiny, but it's momentary. The most beautiful trophy will fade. It will fade. But within the partnership, you have a person that not only gets to the finish line with you, but understands the process and what it took to get there. They see you beyond your greatest moment. They believe in you when there is nothing to believe in. And the scary thing is that I see a lot of young men, a bit like how our females are in today, okay? Now, and let me qualify this, is that women will often, listen, guys, this is the best way for me to explain it to you. That little bag that your missus or the person you're taking on a date or whoever you're hanging out with, that little expensive bag, right, that they take to wherever it is you take them, that's not the bag of purpose. That's the bag they want to show off to everybody else and be like, look at my Chanel, look at my Gucci bag, look at my Louis bag. The bag they take to work or to the gym, or if they're going out and doing something that requires something that is not about the visual aesthetic, that bag is usually some big, clunky, junky thing that they can carry their whole life in. It ain't that little cute Louis bag. It's not that. They're not pulling for that bag. Which should tell us something, that sometimes the thing that looks the best isn't the most efficient. And the thing that is most efficient does not concern itself with outward appearance. I'm not saying that it can't have a beautiful outward appearance, but it doesn't concern itself. And I think there are far too many young men that are concerning themselves with shells and not testing substance. Substance is what will maintain you, sustain you, and get you over. So, my true advice, or my best advice for any person, and especially young men, looking to find, cultivate, or experience true love, trade the trophy for a partner. Trophies don't get partners. Partners make trophies. Okay, cool. Let's do one more question and let's get out of here. Please let this be a nice question. Oh my heavens. This might be our last Yo Pops episode, ladies and gentlemen. How would your dad advise King Charles concerning the incident with his brother? How would he handle it, and what do you think he would do? No more of these. Okay, I know exactly how to answer this. All right, Dad, I know what you'd say. Right, I'm going to compartmentalize. Okay, that's the first thing I need you to understand. I want to compartmentalize because sometimes I think that when a situation happens, we become, as we should, we become overly obsessed with the visual manifestation of the thing and often miss the reality or the intention of it because our focus is usually aligned to what is most visual. So I want to say something verbatim. I understand the position that the king holds. I also understand the position his brother holds, and I understand the connection to that. However, before he ever knew he was going to be a king, or before he ever knew he was going to be a prince or a duke, they just knew they were brothers. They just knew that they had a mum who had a real serious job, and there was a lot of people always around, and sometimes they maybe didn't get to see their parents as much as they wanted. And life for them was a version of normal that most of us wouldn't ever experience or understand. So I'm able, and this is me, this is not me telling you how to think, what to do. It's just so that you can follow my thought process and thinking, because I'm going to divorce who they are from what they do. Okay? Obviously, either one of them could abdicate or step away from duties, and we're seeing a bit of that. But the reality is that who they are as people is completely different. And when I say who they are as people, I mean in terms of their positions as people. I have the ability to compartmentalize, and I can see something over here, disagree with it, or even think it's abhorrent and abominable and disgraceful, and still be able to deal with a human, because I just realized that in who we are, we make mistakes. And some mistakes are much, much worse than others. Yet at the same time, a mistake is a mistake. So I would, if I could, I want to deal with this on a family level and a brotherhood level. And I would simply say this: love is the death of duty. And duty is the death of love. So in terms of what's going to happen in a official capacity, that will be, because there are certain protocols and rules and boundaries that we all have to adhere to. And in a position like they're in, the eye of the public, and especially when certain bits of information are repetitiously being presented to us, it will create a lot of spotlight and create a lot of tension. So I say that to say this, that whilst he must do his office as king, he cannot forget that his first duty as a brother is to be his keeper. Even if you gotta go help pack up that lodge, I'd be like, bro, we're gonna go and camp in Hyde Park because you can't stay here. And the reason why I say that is for this reason. Oftentimes we won't be made privy to some of, we're often not privy to some of the tensions and the struggles that shape family dynamic. And when you sometimes have a family member that you feel is either entitled or has been given more than what they deserve, in moments of vulnerability, it's often easier to lean into a harsher form of judgment based on historical perspective that comes from maybe a lack or a hurt we had. And I'm going to make this make sense. I really enjoyed history at school, and I really enjoyed The Crown, the Netflix episode. Now, whilst I do not believe that that program was what I would call 100% accurate portrayal of everything that goes on within that world, I do believe it was close enough for us to be able to follow a thread to get an idea of what might be going on. And outside of that, anybody that kind of had an understanding of the late Queen would know that she was incredibly fond of her baby child. Incredibly fond. And this may not have been the first indiscretion that had happened, but most parents, and especially when you love your child, protecting them is the most important thing to you. And I think there may have been times when the king may have thought that his mum should have been a little bit more firmer, and that maybe some of the responsibilities that fell upon his shoulders were so heavy. And here he has an entitled little brother that doesn't understand the weight of responsibility and accountability. And some of his actions are careless, at the least. And you can sometimes build up a resentment. And resentment unchecked will turn into bitterness. And so sometimes the fluidity of love, and let me put it in this way, the same sun that melts wax dries clay. I'm gonna say that one more time. The same sun that melts wax, it dries clay. And sometimes situations and moments happen when our heart should be wax, but because of how we feel, it's hardening clay. And I'm looking at something that I'm like, I now understand how sometimes generationally our problems or issues within our families continue, because they're seeded before in a moment that wasn't seen. And as we were talking before about seeds, seeds first grow down, right? And the rooting system, it gains strength in the dark, so that when it then comes up and breaks the surface, whatever's happening in the environment around it, it will stand. It may lose branches, it may lose leaves, but its rooting system is so strong that it means it will withstand whatever's happening above the surface. Love is the ultimate rooting system. Love is the ultimate rooting system. And there were things that we've seen in the press over the last year concerning Prince William and his younger brother. And this may be the king's opportunity to seed something long lasting that will outlast him, even when the visual version of him ceases to be. So what I would say is, whilst they have to do their office, whilst he has to do his office, and obviously I'm talking on behalf of my dad, whilst he has to do his office, I believe if my father was called in, he would say, firstly, love is the death of duty. Secondly, you will forever be your brother's keeper. And love doesn't just mean me doing what you want me to do. Love means doing what I need and have to do because it's the right thing. And so, yeah, I think, and I've got a baby brother, so I can kind of understand that dynamic in terms of how they are. And I spoiled my baby brother. And there are times when he frustrates me. He does. But my love for him is stronger than any frustration or disappointment I have. And sometimes love is insulation. Sometimes love is putting up the necessary walls and barriers to protect. But it doesn't mean that you isolate. You may have to manage the access, but don't cut it off. Don't cut it off. And so, yeah, I think if my dad was here, he would advise the king to do what he must within his office, but don't lose the understanding of your heart, and never lose the fact that your first duty is and will always be to be your brother's keeper, even when he doesn't want to be kept. So, that's enough questions off of that. I hope that you've all enjoyed this session with me today, and even though he's not here, he'll be back soon. We also have a guest coming on next week. I am not going to say any more than that, but we are going to be leaning in to a couple of new dimensions and visual versions of the poddy. So when I say to you, yo, Pops back chat, hold that. Don't worry. You'll get that very shortly. Guys, have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share at Sean Williams World, at Yo Pops Podcast, at Bishop L.A. Williams. Also, you can donate, Patreon. Don't forget to download as well. Have an amazing rest of your week. I'll see you soon. And wait there. Blessings.